Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. Um, Today, Jeremy and I are going to talk a little bit about Microprofile and Quarkus and why that's relevant to us. So, cue the slide, Jeremy.
All right. Let's see. Share my
We
screen.
only have one slide today. The rest of the time, we're going to talk about code because we know that you prefer the code over the slide. But
We have two slides.
yeah, we got an intro slide.
Yeah, that slide. And then we have this
Three,
slide.
if you consider the thank you slide. So,
Yeah, three.
what is Microprofile? So Microprofile was created way back in 2016, I think, with IBM, Payara, Red Hat, Tommy Tribe. And really, it's a set of specifications that were added to also brought into the Jakarta EE umbrella. And really, today there's like 12 specifications in the microprofile community, and we're going to talk about a few of them. But what are we looking at on this picture? Is config is really about externalizing configuration, and fault tolerance is about defining different strategies for application robustness. Health is pretty obvious, but it really is what's the health of our underlying platform. Uh, JWT and RBAC is about securing the REST endpoints. Metrics is about exposing the platforms and metrics. OpenAPI is the specification for documents and RESTful endpoints. Open tracing and open consensus got combined, and that's now part of telemetry. And but it's still right now backward compatible. So we're going to go over that, and then REST. There's some that are like individual components outside of the spec. So those things on the right. So like context propagation, GraphQL, reactive streams is a pretty cool one. So if we want to catch streams on reactive streams, messaging is also in there. I myself and Jeremy use that for Kafka sometimes. But there's really also a bunch of core principles that come along with this. So Microprofile Foundation has some core principles like it's got to be open source, vendor neutral, community, and collaborative. But what we're going to talk about today is some of those extended tenets, like limited processes. So do we have to have a bunch of processes to use Microprofile? Can we experiment and innovate quickly while using Microprofile? And how high is the barrier to entry? So what we're going to show today is a little bit about Quarkus's implementation of Microprofile. You can also find that implementation under Payara and Red Hat JBoss EAP and Wildfly. So if you're doing Jakarta EE or Java EE today, you can start using many of the things that we're going to show you today also under those environments. So why don't we get rid of the slide, because I really hate slides at the end of the day, and we can jump into the code. So Jeremy, maybe if you want to talk us through what we're looking at.
Let's turn this on here. So this demo application. So I saw Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible, day before yesterday. My daughter's a really big Mission Impossible fan. I don't know if that extends to all of Tom Cruise or just Mission Impossible. I think mostly just the Mission Impossible movies. It's really good. If you haven't seen it, if you like that series, they're also battling a large computer virus is the bad guy, right? So it's nice. An AI that's turned sentient, right? But since that's going on, I kind of thought I would make an application based around Mission Impossible. So last night we built this application. It's called Mission Observability, right? So if you go to, you can find it on GitHub, right? So Mission Observability, where are my repos? Mission Observability is the repo. So what it does, a few things. I've got Postman here as well, so we can get movies, all the movies, right? We can get a random movie. So this is just going to give us a random movie here. Right, Dead Reckoning Part 1 was the one I saw last night, and that computer's a bad guy. Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, all good stuff. Fallout, I like Fallout a lot, probably because like it's in Paris, like they're just racing around Paris. We also have IMF agents. So IMF agents.
What's an IMF thing?
An IMF? Yeah, if you are not a fan of, and feel free to ask questions about, smaller I or Microprofile or Mission Impossible. We'll try to field any questions. IMF agents is the impossible mission force, which is who our protagonists work for. There's one notable one missing here who I forgot to put in the database, which would be Ethan Hunt, right? So Tom Cruise is not here, but this is the rest of the IMF, or at least some of the other IMF people. You can also get a random IMF agent. So you see, I didn't catch Grace's last name. An error.
We're gonna have to deal with that later.
Deal with that later, yeah. Error again.
Right? Wow, another one.
And then there's some of the best quotes from the movies, right? So there's all the quotes, and of course we can get random quotes again, right? So, whoops, not RN. Random quotes. So what's done is done when we say it's done, right? So if you guys know, we also stream this at 8 o'clock in the morning, ideally to capture people in the EU and UK. And we did this right at the end. The random one that came up was this, which I thought was kind of perfect. We'll see if we can maybe make that happen again today, but it's completely random, so it probably won't. So some of the things we're going to be talking about here. So here's our application, right? We notice we actually have one problem in there, and we have no window into what's going on inside this application. But it's a basic Quarkus application. If you want to look here, we've got we screen up. I like to organize stuff along the lines of domain and infrastructure. So I have domain objects like IMF agent, right? That is a Panache entity. If you haven't seen Panache before, really fantastic extension of Hibernate that makes it really easy to do database stuff. And I like to use repositories. So I like DDD patterns. So I would like to interact with the database through a repository, which means I can have multiple different ways in and out and develop using hexagonal architecture, right? And when you look at what a repository does, you just implement a Panache repository. Also, again, makes it really, really nice and easy to use. Actually, I shouldn't show that one because that's the one that has our bug in it. And then I have resources like our movies resource right here, which is just a simple REST endpoint, right? So path for movies, I am injecting a movie repository and I'm running the stuff right through here. So this is all pretty straightforward stuff. So first things first, if we're going to just start off getting some observability in here. So Rob, what would you say would be the first thing we would probably do?
Let's first define what we're talking about from observability. So everyone's familiar with logs. So we're going to talk about logging today, and we're going to talk about metrics, and we're going to talk about tracing. So that's how we're going to define our observability. So I think one of the first things we might want to do is we know that method that you're calling sometimes throws an exception. So let's figure out if we can put some observability around that and add some telemetry. So if you go to the command line, and we can add an extension to this project through Quarkus extensions and say open or Quarkus-OpenTelemetry or just OpenTelemetry, and that will successfully run, which we always act surprised during the demo if something works. And if you go to the POM file, we can see that it added an extension in there for us for a dependency. There you go. So that's the only thing we did so far. If we go into the properties file, we might want to do something in properties really quick and enable something in properties so that we can see what is going on here.
And yeah, I cheated, right? So I don't remember how to type all this stuff, right?
So the Quarkus OTEL exporter there is a type of exporter that we're going to use here. That is actually defaulted in Quarkus right there, but we're going to explicitly put it in here just for conversation's sake. So if we just do this and then we run it, let's see what happens. Now, what we didn't tell you is that in the background, Jeremy has a Docker Compose file that has two things running in it. Maybe if you want to switch over to that real quick, just to show them. And we have Jaeger, which is going to be a collector for us and collect this information. And we're also running Prometheus for something that we're going to do later.
Yeah, here's my compose file, mission observability. We have Prometheus and Jaeger, right? And then I have all this. I've been playing with Dapper, so I still have that stuff going. And I was just demoing FTP stuff, so I'll stop that with Camel.
Yeah, I like when Jeremy opens up a screen because we can always see what he was doing last.
Right.
Yeah.
Then this is my current application is running Postgres, right? So I'm just running that using dev.
Oh yeah, why don't you show them what the dev view is so that we can understand out of the box what Quarkus gives us with the dev view.
Yeah, we should do that. So localhost 8080. So dev UI. See our dev UI, and this shows us all the stuff we're going to be using inside of here, right? So we have data sources, persistence units, create and drop script for all my tables, right? Drop scripts. So it's really nice when you're developing because you can always just come back and use stuff there. And then we can find our ORM stuff. There's our OpenTelemetry, right? So you see telemetry. And then dev services can come down here, shows us our actual data source connection. And it's that way, if I wanted to say, come in here and set up a connection right here with my data source, I can, right? So let's see data source, let's do that real quick. PostgreSQL and localhost 54669. So it rotates ports. Now the other thing that's interesting to notice is this is not interfering. If I run, all right, let's test the connection. Yep, it's good. Okay, so I can now see my stuff. Public. Refresh. Yep, there we go.
And we can also see Kafka in there too. It'll start something for Kafka.
Oh yeah, you know what? I need to. Wrong database. Database is actually Quarkus. Come on. All right. Anyway, I'm not going to move.
No, this only happens when we're showing somebody something.
Section. This wasn't even part of the demo. Why don't
I know. Let's go back to the.
So let's go back to the actual demo. So what did you want to do? You wanted to find.
I just want to see what I'm going to get for just adding telemetry to the project.
There's some random quotes. Actually, we should read some of these. So right, because these are fun. I am the storm, right? So I would have thought the hardest part was serving that pressing need of yours to get your gun off. We just rolled up a snowball and tossed it into hell. Now let's see what chance it has. Okay, that's cool. So this is our Jaeger dashboard, right? And if we know our services, it's already grabbed our service, right? So it sees our mission observability service. This marries back to this thing right here.
Yep.
I named this mission observability service. And so we do that. Operation, it's got a bunch of operations. So you can see the dev UI operations, right? Quotes, random. That's one that I've been monkeying around with here. So we've got some traces. So Rob, what's a span here?
So let's click on the span and look at it. So now that span is just that call, and that's going to show you some basic information about that call. And that's just what you're getting out of the box, right? So that we're able to view. So we know the endpoint. Now the point of all the telemetry together, so logs and traces and metrics, is that I could use all those things together to triage and figure out problems. And one of the things that we can do is use the span right off the bat to say, where did we actually enter this call? So a lot of times your company might have a third-party software that they bought in order to do observability from the outside in. But to me, the really interesting part is actually what goes on in your code, not the calls between things, right? So they're always looking, for failures between things. I want to see what's going on in my code. And the other thing is, take a simple use case like Jeremy wrote the code, he leaves, he didn't document it, and we got somebody new that's going to take over the code.
Code is the comment.
Code is the comment. So if I already have some tracing involved in my code, I could tell the developer, you know what, go sit down, work through some of the use cases and click on it and see how it takes you as a flow through the code. So in order to do that, we might want to add a couple additional things. So what if we wanted to name the span?
Oh, you want to name the span first?
Yeah, let's name the span first.
Okay.
That's okay. You could have left that. We can.
We're doing quotes random, right? So we're doing quotes.
So there's a bunch of things that we can do. And one of the simplest things that we can do is we can say with span, and then we can name the span, give it a specific name. So it's not just looking, us randomly looking through a bunch of stuff for an endpoint, but we can actually name the span and do a query on it, right? And you keep getting that error. We're going to have to handle that eventually. So if we keep, all right, now if you look, we should see a named span in there. And there you go.
Cool. Name span.
All right, so there's a bunch of other things that we can add in our code to follow code around through. But just from, getting started and low barrier to entry, we're going to stick with some of the stuff that's really just about, what we can do with annotations kind of thing. So one of the next things we do, we know that there's a database involved, but we don't actually see that yet there. And Jeremy kind of showed us a little bit ahead this last time. So we can add OpenTelemetry JDBC, and we can have that database participate, those calls to that database participate in this now.
Yeah, now this one is, we couldn't add from the command line. This is not actually a Quarkus extension, right? So we're just adding this in. And then, all right, so yeah, so Quarkus picked that up. Dev mode picked that up. We've rebuilt and redeployed, so I don't have to bounce the server or anything. So let's come over here and we can do a few of these. Oh, what's done is done when we say it's done. Yeah, gentlemen, this is Solomon Lane, Mr. Lane.
Jeremy loves this series of movies, so I haven't seen them yet, so I'm going to have to watch them.
Very upset. Yeah, they are. Starting with number 3, they're really good. All right, so so gets quotes random.
Yeah, I think there's 2 spans there now, right?
Yeah, we should see. Let me see. Yeah, more.
Yeah.
Did it not pick it up? Back. Maybe I do need to bounce it.
Oh, could be.
Yeah, the instrumentation, it might need to bounce it. I thought it recompiled though. Let's see. You know what? I wonder if I need to bounce Jaeger.
Oh my.
Kind of strange, but oh, you know what? So not.
That's just the Jaeger queries.
That's the Jaeger queries. I'm not interested in that. Operations, get quotes random. Oh, you know what I need to do? Yeah. Configuration.
Oh, you got to go into properties.
Got to go and turn on, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you got to start.
There you go. So live debugging, right? We didn't turn on the properties. Now you need to bounce Quarkus, I'll bet.
No, I don't need to bounce Quarkus, I don't think.
Or you could try it.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe I do need to bounce Quarkus for that. Okay. Yeah, some properties files will pick up, some properties don't always pick up. So, well, let's see. All right, so that's some quotes. Operation, we'll say quote, random quote. Now we have 4 spans, right?
Yeah, so if the guys that were demoing this, could remember everything. So sometimes you're going to have to add a property. We'll try to talk you through some of that. But really, all we did so far was add the the dependency, and then we added the property, and now we can see that we made a JDBC call, and we should be able to see the query down there too, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I've expanded this too much. So we get down, there's our get connection. We expand into here. You can see the connection string, right? Yep. You can see the database statement that we're actually selecting.
Yep.
Right? So it's really nice amount of stuff that we can get out of this.
Cool. So now we've named the span. We still haven't figured, we can see how the timing is working, and we can see how much time each part of the trace is. Again, there's a bunch of other things that we could actually do in code to do this. You might be wondering, should I use this in production? I would say start off in development and only add the tracing capabilities to the things that are most interesting to you as a developer. So I would start with things that you think could go wrong, and what would be interesting to you as a developer if you had to debug something and that happened from production. Only add those things first. Otherwise, if you add this to everything, you're going to get overwhelmed with the amount of information that's going to be output here. The other thing is that what we're not showing you right now is that I personally would take, instead of going straight to Jaeger, I'd probably push this off to a sidecar so that I could turn this on and off in production through a sidecar. So we might push it out to the sidecar and let the sidecar decide how we're going to forward this to whatever our collector is outside of the sidecar. I don't know. You got any comments on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that the way you can do some of this is false, right? So properties are parameterizable, and we're coding it here. This is super easy to pull from a config map or a secret, if you're in Kubernetes, right? Or from properties or from command line, right? Mm-hmm. So there's multiple ways we can pass this in. So you can have your application set up, ready to go, and you can toggle it based on the properties of a config map if you're in production. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And because, you probably don't want this on all the time.
So before we figure out what's going on with that exception, let's add a couple more things that lets us determine at runtime, how healthy we are from the get-go. So I think if you go to the command line and do Quarkus ext add, we can add small ry health.
Yep. So
all right.
In here.
Now, all we did was add small ry health. And if we go back and run it.
Yeah, we'll get functionality for free, essentially, right?
Yep.
Without having to do anything. So we've got our thing here, and we go Q health.
So just by adding that to the project, we can get an easy health check to say whether or not this is up and running.
Yep. And one of the nice things we have here is it knows that we have a database, so it's already implemented a database check. Whoops. Let's come back to our dev services, and now in dev, there's also health services. Where's health services?
Right there, right in front of you.
Right in front of me. Oh, health UI. Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
So application's ready and database connection is health check, right? So,
cool. So we added health. What if we wanted to add, liveliness probe?
All right.
So while Jeremy's doing that, just for those who may not know, there's a nuance between liveliness and readiness. And liveliness is really about, if we fail, should we restart a container possibly, like if we're in Kubernetes? And a readiness probe is really about, if it's not ready, should we actually stop the application from serving anything up for traffic? So we're just going to add a liveliness probe here.
And this is, so it's application scope bean. Oh, I need to put one other annotation here.
Yeah, because this is a CDI bean.
Do do all the normal stuff you'd expect to be able to do, right?
Yeah.
So
inject stuff in here too to test against, right?
yeah, so let's say if our databases aren't up, we're not live, right? So I can inject things. So I can inject my movie repository. I can
inject
quote repository, and I can inject my IMF agent repository. And then I can write some nice custom logic here. It's actually a little bit gnarly. So let's say if movie repository list, we just do count to, let's just do list all size greater than or equal to 1. And IMF agent repository list all size is greater than or equal to 1. And quote repository list all size is greater than or equal to 1. We'll return health check response up is up and connected to the database. And then we'll, if it not, we will return health check response down.
So obviously this is where we can put some custom code to do some checking. So when we do those liveliness probes, in production, we can test whether or not we should even be making this call, or we should
restart down
up and running, right?
Now it's up. Reporting health status down. Check our live client status down.
Yeah, because you restarted, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think I might have left it. Application is clearly working. Exception class transact. Oh, there we go.
We didn't put a transaction on the CDI bean.
Yeah, so this is just crapping out. And it's a CDI bean, so you can do things like manage transactions. All right, now you go. Yeah, applications up and connected to the database, right? So now we're right.
Well, that's nice. That was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, right. So that's cool. Now that we've done, let's see, what have we done? We've instrumented it so that we could get some traceability in there.
Yeah.
We've instrumented it so that we could get some observability with, is it up or down? Is it ready kind of thing? But we still haven't handled that exception, right? So why don't we do that now and deal with some fault tolerance? So we can do small ry -fault -tolerance.
And we should show it. I'll start Quarkus dev. So small ry, by the way, small ry is a project or umbrella project for Microprofile and some other stuff. I don't know where this really pretty bucolic picture came from. I have no idea where this name came from. But the projects inside of here, most of the Microprofile stuff, so config, JWT, health check, all the stuff you saw as part of Microprofile in here, as well as some other stuff, right? Some REST EasyRex client and some other things. Small ry mutiny is also reactive and reactive messaging. This is some of the most interesting stuff that Quarkus has. But there's a lot of stuff under the small ry banner. So that's just the community. And so you'll see when you see small ry, that's what we mean. All right, so we're up here, and let's come back to this. It's this quotes one. No, it's IMF agents that was giving us a problem, right?
Yep.
IMF agents.
You still getting that exception?
Let's see. So there's Benji done. Yeah, there we go.
Oh.
And we're getting a runtime exception that says service failed, right? So
yeah, so let's jump into the code and go to that method.
Oops. So this is, we'll start from the beginning, right? So here is our random agent, right? So what are we doing here?
So let's add a retry in there.
Let's add a retry. That'd be one nice, easy way to do this, right?
Yep. So we can say retry. Just do retry on equals, and then runtime exception dot class. There.
That's
Okay. And then we can say max retries. The default is 3, so but we'll graphically put it out here, and then do a short delay.
Oh yeah, and delay of 150 milliseconds, right?
Yeah, because you got that nice Mac M1 that's really fast. So yeah, I think he's.
A couple times you notice a little bit of a pause.
Yeah, I saw a pause, but I'm not seeing the
pause right there.
Yep, but I'm not seeing the exception anymore.
Yeah, I bet we can find the exception. Yeah, right there is failing. Failing with 19, excellent. Failing with 18, failing with 15, right?
Yeah,
so we're getting failures and we're getting errors right there, right?
So how are you generating those errors, by the way? Did somebody inject some code there when we weren't looking?
Probably what happened. It must have been the entity from the movie.
Yeah, let's go look at that because
endless bad jokes we can make about this movie. But yeah. So this is the entity, which I guess no spoiler alerts from the movie, but a computer is the bad guy. So we've injected some code here. All I'm doing, I've got a counter here, and just getting the number of that counter, and if you can divide it by 4, it's fine. If not, it's not good. And we just throw a new runtime exception saying service failed, right? Yep. Otherwise, we just return this. So obviously, by putting in the retry agent, we're just going to fail. Who cares, right?
So we're kind of eating the exception, though. So a couple things here. We haven't looked at, obviously it's going into the log someplace. It's logging somewhere. But we just kind of ate the exception, and I don't really like eating the exception. Can we do like a fallback?
Yeah, let's do that, and let's solve this here, right?
All right. So with a fallback, we can say fallback method equals, and then give it the method name.
And then conveniently, I have a method here. Default IMF agent that returns Ethan Hunt, who is conspicuously missing from our other one, right? Since he's kind of the main.
Yeah. So before you go on there, tell me that story you were telling me earlier about Netflix or something.
Oh, I will. So and also you notice here when we get Ethan Hunt, the ID is null because he's not in the database, right?
Wow. So instead of eating the exception, we're now going to this fallback method and outputting some default data, right?
Yeah, and a great example I heard, it was a story from Amazon when Amazon was first getting into streaming video, right? They had a question to ask about what happens if you go in, you select your video and your credit card process doesn't work. And they made the business decision to fall back to allowing you to view the movie anyway, because they were going up against Netflix, right? So they have an incumbent there, and they realized if people have a bad experience with Amazon Prime rentals, then they just won't use it again. And so they said it's worth us to just pay the royalties and just eat it, so the people have a good experience and we build up a user base. But I think that's a great example of communicating with your business, right? Because in this case, we would have to talk to our business and say, hey, and this is honestly, example, probably should have written this example so that I was calling out to some kind of external service because it kind of makes more sense there, right? Mm-hmm. But you wouldn't really do this in inline code so much. You would actually just handle the exception, right? But you communicate with the business to say, like, if we can't reach this service or if this kind of error happens, what do you want to occur, right? Mm-hmm. So we can return this default IMF agent here in this case. So I think that's a nice illustration of working tightly with your business to get to solve your problems. Cool. All right, so that's our fallback method. What if we want to do something else?
Well, what if we wanted to add a circuit breaker because we're failing and we keep getting a lot of calls to this thing and it just keeps failing, right? And we want to add the capability to just shut it down because it's kind of overwhelming the server. So we can do this thing. It's a circuit breaker, not to be confused with it's a circuit breaker pattern, but not. It's not, like a Kubernetes circuit breaker or something like that. This is going to be in our code. And so if we add a circuit breaker, what's going on here is basically after a certain amount of invocations, right? So there's the request threshold. We hit something, and then after a certain amount of invocations, we're going to just fail if we hit the time period that the failure invocations happen within. So Jeremy put a ratio in there that said if we failed 25% of the time out of, well, it would be.
So that's a runtime exception.
Yep. But do like 4. Change the number to like 4 in there or something for the threshold. No, for the threshold.
Sorry.
Yeah. So once the first error happens, the timing starts. And then if we hit that threshold within that amount of time, we actually kill the thing.
And we notice now we're not hitting it, right? Now circuit breaker's open.
Yep.
Circuit breaker's open.
So once the circuit breaker's open, if you keep hitting it within that time, then the circuit breaker is going to get kicked, right? If you don't and you go back, then the circuit breaker will be reset.
Yep. And again, this is probably pretty synthetic, right? You're not going to do this in inline code. You would do it if you're making a REST call somewhere, or calling another process.
Yeah, I mean, we use the circuit breaker pattern in Camel. Actually, somebody just did a really nice article on that. Some Red Hatter. Great. So let's go back to just the either the fallback or the retry, because that's cleaner. For now.
Let's do the retry. Fallback method. That's nice and clean.
So we added all this stuff. We got everything, but we still don't have the actual logging. So let's add a new set of extensions here. So we can add Quarkus add micrometer, and then we can add Quarkus extension add micrometer dash registry dash Prometheus.
You could put those on the same line. Yeah. But I didn't. But I didn't.
Could put them on the same line. I think you can. So we just added micrometer and the registry. So what we're going to do is be able to get metrics, and we're going to enable that a couple other things. So what Jeremy's enabling right now is just some alternative output that we can get. So the very first thing is we want to catch some of this stuff in Prometheus.
All right. Let's go over here and Jaeger, got Prometheus.
Yep. So if you click on that, you get this lovely pile of soup, and you can see that there's a pile of stuff being pushed out to Prometheus here.
And then we can also come check our Dev UI.
Dev UI.
We can say Micrometer metrics. We can check out our Prometheus style metrics.
Yep.
Right? And we can check our JSON style metrics. So if you want to see this in JSON.
So the JSON looks a little ugly to me there. So open up Firefox real quick, because Firefox actually formats it better.
You mean localhost?
So do localhost 9000/q/metrics/JSON. Yeah, see, it's not. I just take that and put it in Firefox. See how it aligns it nicely and gives you that option to like save it and do all that stuff on the top there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why Chrome is different. So if you're playing around with this, look at it in a different browser. I tend to use Firefox all the time. Most people probably use Chrome, but you will see a difference there. You also saw that Jeremy had it in Q metrics Prometheus, which was another output method that we had there.
Yep.
And then you could do just 9090 metrics. We give you all kinds of options to do this, right? So now you wouldn't enable all this different kind of options, at runtime. Just do localhost 9090/metrics. Yep. Yet another way to view it. So this is where you'd have a third-party tool that would, or you're going to eventually push all this into some custom elk stack to view some other way and sift through it with Grafana or build some reporting off of it. But the point here is that right now we did our health checks. We did some fault tolerance stuff. We then wanted to capture the logging and where would that go? And we can provide all this information so somebody can take, and with a third-party tool, you could bundle all this together. But what Jeremy's also adding here now is some additional capability that says, what did we do, for timed, right? So what do we want to do there?
Whoops.
I do timed now. Oh, that's undercounted, right? Yeah, put the. So there's a couple of annotations that we can add here.
What happened to my annotation? Do I have to bounce it when it's instrumenting stuff?
Not all the time. See, that's.
Oh, wait a minute. You know what it is. I'm doing it again. Second time.
What did you do?
Oh, no, it's turned on, isn't it? Okay, so let's see. Wait, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess because it's so we can say.
Do a search for that name.
Oh, yeah, let's actually pull up the. Be sure we need to actually generate some data, right?
That'd be good.
There we go.
There we go.
So
now we can see this. There's some stuff we can put in the code. So if we wanted to pull on the meter registry, we could create a gauge, something called a gauge, and actually do a timing resource and stuff in here. But before we even get to that, we're just going to do something called counted, because we want to add how many times this thing was called. So if we wanted to correlate, that code that Jeremy had in there to artificially throw the exception, throws the exception based on, every few it's going to throw the exception, right? No, do like time now, dot now, and that one. Yep, just do time dot now. Yeah. You can get rid of random movie dot.
what's this?
So we want to look at the metrics around this, saying, how many times did this get called, and correlate that with the exception that got thrown. We wanted to show the name of the span. So we correlated the span, how many times the exception got thrown. We can now correlate the logs by pulling that in. And then we can add some fault tolerance around that to actually handle that.
Yeah, you get your span IDs, so you can correlate all this stuff together, right?
Yep. Now we can correlate all this stuff together. So if we do metrics, tracing, and logging, we can now correlate all this stuff together. Now you'd have to have a third-party tool to probably do this, or write something yourself. But the point is, we actually can pull all this information together now.
Yep. So you can see a number of invocations, and let's just do it again here. We'll do 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
And let's do refresh that. have 9 invocations, right? So it's counting this, the total amount of time it's called and stuff, right? So it gives us a nice way to like look into this, get a window into what our application's doing and what's taking up time.
Right. So again, what we wanted to show was leveraging Microprofile and Quarkus. There wasn't much process involved in order to get this going. We did simply added some dependencies through the extensions that Jeremy, through the Quarkus CLI. It allowed us to experiment with some things in order to handle how we were going to handle the exceptions that are being thrown. It's pretty low barrier to entry to get going. It can be pretty complex once you start, wanting to add other things in here. Again, your predilection might be to come in here and just turn everything on and start using everything, but you're going to be overwhelmed by the data. So I would recommend, just adding the things that would be most interesting to you as a developer, either first for debugging or things that you think you would need when you probably hit something in production, because it is going to be a lot of data. Some of this data is going to go out to like a time series database. And so the more tags and labels that you add to the time series database, the more it's going to mushroom out the amount of data that's being held in there. So just be cognizant of that. But from getting started, this was pretty easy, I think. I don't know, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think it's pretty nice and pretty easy way to do things.
Yeah, and I didn't have to include some Netflix thing or Zipkin or some other external thing. It's built in by a standard, right? So I think that's another thing that I really like about the Quarkus aspect of that.
Yeah. Do we have any questions or comments or feedback?
Yeah, and feel free to, you can probably find our information or to connect with us offline pretty easily. So feel free to tell us how awful our demo was or how good it was, because we want that positive reinforcement. All right, so what are we going to do next month? I think I keep seeing all this stuff about WASM, WebAssembly. I was thinking maybe we'd code up some live WebAssembly next month and discuss why that might be different from the JVM and what might be of value to it.
Sure. All right. So yeah, join us next month for WASM.
Sure.
And WASI.
All right. All right. Thank you very much for everyone joining us today. Hopefully you got something out of it, and appreciate you spending the time. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.